My name is Eliza Marlowe, and I'm 29 years old. Foundations are everything. That's not just a slogan I tape to a hard hat, it's the law I live by. When a structure fails, it isn't dramatic at first. It's subtle, a hairline crack, a soft spot in the soil, a beam that hums under load. You don't wait for collapse. You investigate, document, and make a plan. Then you act. For 3 years, I believe the foundation of my relationship with Mason Hale, 27, charming, photosynthetic, under ring lights, was poured in something close to bedrock. I supported the build. I bought the camera body he swore would unlock the brand, the editing suite, the capsule wardrobe he said would signal elevated taste. I told myself I was investing in our future by investing in his. When Mason wanted the ultimate boys' trip with Pierce and Damon, I said yes. The resort was the kind of place where every surface is designed to be photographed. White linen and curated palms, infinity pools trembling, into a blue horizon that probably has a trademark. The total for 3 lads over 5 nights cleared $4,000. I transferred the money to Mason's account and drove them to the airport. He kissed my cheek outside departures and promised to bring me back sun in a bottle. The first days were a highlight reel on my phone. Mason, Pierce, and Damon mugging at brunch with cocktails the color of cartoons. Slow motion laughter, slides of sunsets, gym selfies, captioned with aphorisms about grind and gratitude. I sent back hearts and thumbs ups, like a human algorithm doing its job. On the morning they were scheduled to fly home, my phone pinged. The text was chirpy with emojis, typed in the careless confidence of someone who believes the world is upholstered for his comfort. Mason, hey babe, we're not ready for it to end. Pierce found a killer deal to upgrade and extend a week. It's perfect. Send $1,500 and we're golden. Love you. It wasn't the money, it was the architecture of the sentence. No question mark. No, would you be okay if... Just a decision delivered like a weather report, a demand padded in confetti. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop. A week earlier, Mason mentioned that a mutual acquaintance, Gemma, from his brand circles, was at a neighboring property with her family. Gemma's profile is public, aggressively so. I scrolled her stories, each rectangle a sun-bleached square of curated joy. Then I saw it, a wide shot of a crowded beach club. Heat shimmer, base flickering through captioned text. In the middle of the frame, Mason. His arms are low around the waist of a woman in a gold bikini whose hair catches the light like a dare. Her name, per Gemma's earlier story tags, is Nia. Mason had told me Nia was basically family, also gay, no threat. They weren't dancing like family. They were moving together in a way that closes distance, erases witness, and writes its own caption. This is more than the music. Behind them, Damon is kissing someone I don't recognize. Pierce is filming. The camera dips, then lingers. No accidents here. Every angle is intention. I didn't feel an explosion. I felt a clean snap. The kind you sometimes hear in a member under load right before it fails. Small, decisive, undeniable. I moved through my flat like an engineer at a site after a storm. No fury, no theatrics, just process. First, legal. I typed tenant rights without lease UK and read until the landscape was mapped. After 3 years of Mason receiving post here, keeping his things here, calling it home, he had residency rights. I could not simply change the locks and toss his life onto the pavement. That would be illegal eviction. Illegality is a gift to a manipulator. I would not gift him leverage. Next, documentation. I found a notice to quit template. I filled it out carefully. Reason. Termination of personal relationship and residency. 30 days to vacate. Date stamped. I printed 3 copies and placed one on the coffee table, one in a folder, and left one on my desk in case he tried to perform losing documents. Then, inventory. I rolled out his 3 large suitcases from the spare room. I packed without malice and without haste. Folded shirts, wrapped shoes, cleared his bathroom shelf, serums and clays in a neat row like small soldiers. In our bedroom, I paused. The air still carried his cologne, sharp and expensive, the kind of scent meant to arrive half a second before he does. On his nightstand sat a velvet box. Inside, the Polaris timepiece, a custom piece I'd designed with an artisan for our second anniversary. The back is engraved with a star map of the night we first said I love you. I had engineered its proportions obsessively, the weight and balance meant to feel like certainty, tethered to skin. Now it felt obscene. Still, I didn't hurl it across the room. I set it on my desk. I took high-resolution photos and a slow video from every angle. Evidence, yes, but also an act of reclaiming the story the object had been drafted to tell. Then I placed the watch carefully into one suitcase, the way you lower something fragile into a cavity designed for it. It was his property. The narrative was mine. By the time I finished, the spare room was an archive. Suitcases lined like punctuation. Labeled boxes stacked to a precise, quiet height. I closed the door. The flat exhaled. I sat on the sofa. The notice to quit lay on the table, its legal diction as soothing as a level bubble settling center. Outside, someone's toddler wailed. An auntie's laugh floated through the stairwell. A bus sighed to a stop. Inside, I waited. I thought about the first time Mason had dazzled me, how he'd turned a Tuesday into a premiere with fairy lights and a playlist and a monologue about the poetry of risk. I thought about how I'd mistaken sparkle for structure, how often charm is just a well-lit facade. Engineers don't worship facades. We respect loads, materials, failure points. We pour footings deep enough to outlast weather. The lock turned. He came in sun-flushed, rolling his carry-on with the performative fatigue of a man who wants praise for surviving paradise. The smile faltered when he saw my face, then fell all the way when his eyes tracked the tidiness. Surfaces cleared, edges squared, the stillness of a room staged for a single scene. "Babe," he said, the word landing uncertainly. "You okay? Your text went dark. I slid my phone across the table. The paused frame from Gemma's story gleamed in the dim. Mason, Nia, the tide of bodies around them, the choreography of a lie. His face did the math in real time. Denial options, attack angles, exit routes. I watched the whole calculus flit behind his eyes. He tried to laugh. "Eliza, that's Nia. I told you. She's like family. She's gay, babe. We were just dancing," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone reading a measurement aloud. "You told me she was gay." "She is." "Then why are her hands there?" I asked, tapping the screen where they were, and heard how flat my voice was. "And why are yours there?" He started again. Something about angles, about how the camera lies, about how the boys found a deal to extend, and how I'd love the upgraded suite when we came back together sometime. The words were a slurry of confetti over concrete. When he ran out of syllables, I slid a second document across the table, the notice to quit. His eyes snagged on the first line and then skittered like they'd touched heat. "What is this?" "A 30-day notice to quit. We're finished. Your belongings are packed in the spare room. You may take what you need for the next few days. The rest, including your laptop, designer items, and the Polaris timepiece, will be released on your move-out day when you return your key." He stared at me the way a man stares at a beam he's just realized isn't decorative. Eliza, you can't hold my stuff hostage. That's illegal." "I'm securing your property pending the termination of residency so that the move-out proceeds peacefully," I said. "You'll receive everything when you vacate on time and return the key. You'll sign an inventory receipt." His breath came sharp. "This is insane. After everything I've done for you." I almost laughed. Instead, I folded my hands and waited for the next tactic. Outside, down the block, a bus sighed again. Inside, the room held its breath as the storm arranged itself behind his eyes. "Babe," he said, switching keys mid-sentence, reaching for the soft place he used to press. "Don't do this. You know I love you." The clock on the oven ticked to the next minute. The foundation had already failed. My job now was to manage the demolition. 30 days, Mason," I said. "Start looking for a flat." He dropped his carry-on hard enough that the handle snapped back with a violent click. His mouth opened, closed. The quiet that followed was thinner than paper. Then he turned and the door slammed. The silence he left behind wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the sound a structure makes when the load shifts. Dangerous, exact, a warning and a promise. I stood, took one long breath, and picked up my folder. There were logs to start, timestamps to keep, a calendar to mark. This would not be a clean fight. It would be a process. And I had already begun. The first hour after the door slam was a siren in my blood that refused to wind down. I made tea because that is what people in shock do. I didn't drink it. I opened a new document and titled it Residency Termination Log. Date, time, description. I entered the text he'd sent about extending the trip, the timestamp of Gemma's story, when the lock turned, what I said, what he said, the notice served, his response. I attached the photos of the Polaris timepiece and the video sweep I'd taken. I scanned the signed notice for my own records, even though he hadn't touched a pen. I'd anticipated that and mailed a copy to his email address on file with the subject line, Formal Notice to Quit. 30 days. Process is a kind of anesthesia. It doesn't numb, it clarifies. 20 minutes later, the first volley arrived. Mason, Eliza, please. Can we talk like adults? I messed up. I had too much to drink. It meant nothing. Don't blow up our life over a stupid dance. I screenshot it and added it to the log. No reply. Mason, okay, wow. You're really going to ghost me after 3 years? You're being cruel. No reply. Mason, I'm coming back. We need to talk face to face. I typed another entry. Warned self, re-entry attempts. Keep chain of custody for communication. No in person without third party. Then I stood, checked the chain on the door, laid the folder on the hall table like a shield. The knock came in under an hour, impatient staccato. Eliza, he called through the wood, voice pitching for contrition. Please, babe, open up. I panicked. The text sounded worse than I meant. Nia's a friend. You know I love you. His tone shifted mid-sentence, a DJ scratching the needle to a new track. You can't keep my laptop. That's theft. My projects, my clients, my entire livelihood is on there. Give it to me now. I opened the door a hand's width, keeping the chain engaged. Mason, you may take toiletries and clothes for the next few days. The rest will be released upon key return at move-out. I'll provide the inventory then. He leaned toward the crack, the sweet of his cologne mixed with the copper of anger. This is illegal. It is not. You'll receive all of your property in 30 days. I am securing it to ensure a peaceful exit. He laughed, sharp, brittle. You're ridiculous. You think a paper makes you a judge? No, I said. It makes me prepared. We stood in the thin space between us. For a moment, he looked lost, like a child who realizes the fairground is over and the lights belong to someone else. He aimed for the soft place again. Eliza, I'm sorry. I didn't sleep with anyone. I let the words hang long enough for their shape to show. That is not the question you've been asked. Something mean flashed through his eyes. The mask clicked into place. Fine. He straightened. My solicitor will be in touch. Please have them send formal correspondence to the email address on the notice, I said, and closed the door gently. Silence returned. Not peace. Function. I sat back at the desk and drafted a short email with subject property secured, access terms, bullet points, essentials available upon request in scheduled windows, all other property at move-out with inventory and signature, valuables kept in locked storage within the flat. Any attempted forced entry will be reported, all communications to be via email for clarity. I CC'd his personal email and the one listed on his invoices for brand deals. I attached a PDF of the notice again. By evening, the tone pivoted. The messages arrived in a staggered grid, each one casting for a different pressure point. Mason, you're really doing this after all I've invested in us? Mason, this is emotional abuse. Mason, you owe me at least a conversation. Mason, Pierce and Damon think you're being insane. You embarrass me. Mason, why are you trying to ruin my career? I did not engage. I updated the log. I ate toast standing up and discovered halfway through that I'd forgotten butter. I ate it anyway. The kettle boiled dry. I filled it and tried again. The next morning began with contrition in italics. Mason, I made a mistake. One stupid dance. Please don't punish me because you're jealous. You know how my work is. Everyone's touchy-feely. It's performative. It's nothing. There it was. Performative. The word we'd used, in happier months, to laugh at minor scandals in micro-influencer land. He was gifting me my own language as if that would bribe my memory. At noon, the legal phantom appeared. Mason, spoke to a solicitor. You're committing illegal eviction and unlawful retention of goods. Last chance before I file. I replied with a single formal email, no texting, restating terms, citing the notice, and offering a 2-hour window the next day to retrieve essentials in a witnessed exchange. I signed it with my full name and included the line, "All further communications should be in writing." He didn't confirm. Instead, his friends took the field. Pierce posted one of those black screen story slides. "If she controls your stuff, she controls your life. Sis needs therapy, not a boyfriend." He tagged no one. He didn't need to. Damon followed with a boomerang of clinking glasses captioned, "To men who survive manipulative women." I screenshotted both and added them to the log under harassment via proxy. I muted their handles. The room got quieter. At 4 p.m., a delivery arrived. Flowers. Roses so red it felt like a threat. The card, "Let's start over. Dinner, M." I left them on the mat until the petals began to bruise at the edges, then carried them downstairs to the bin. That night, I moved a spare dining chair into the hallway and sat with my back against the door, not because I thought he'd force it, but because the posture of guarding felt necessary. Around midnight, I stood, stretched, and went to the spare room. I opened each suitcase, checked the labels, confirmed the Polaris timepiece was still secure, ensured the laptop was wrapped in a padded sleeve inside the numbered box. I printed a preliminary inventory list and clipped it to a clipboard, adding checkboxes beside each line. I would not be caught scrambling on move-out day. Entropy is the enemy of truth. Day 3 began with sugar. Mason, remember Marseille? When the hotel lost our reservation and I got us the suite anyway? Who advocates for you like I do? The answer arrived in my head unbidden. Me. I advocate for me. Mason, I'm outside. You're being unfair. Open the door. I didn't move. He knocked, quieter this time, then louder, then with a flat hand that turned his presence into percussion. After the 5th knock, it stopped. After the silence, the text. Mason, my mom's worried sick. I told her you're not well. Do you want her to call your mother? I stared at the sentence. It was not a surprise. It was an inevitability. When men like Mason lose their favorite mirror, they go looking for one that will angle the light back to them. Mothers are excellent mirrors if you set them up right. I added the threat to the log and went for a run that was mostly a walk. On the corner by the park, a child in a Spider-Man hoodie was crying. His father crouched, trying to make his voice into a bridge. I wanted to tell him to check the foundation. The real hurt is rarely the toppled ice cream. I kept walking. The city smelled like rain that never came. By afternoon, the solicitor turned out to be an email from a free account with no signature block and a misuse of "whereas so profound I had to laugh." It demanded immediate access to all goods, including laptop and watch, unlawfully restrained. I replied, "Dear counsel," and attached the notice again, stating the terms, offering another 2-hour window for essentials with a witness present, and requesting their SRA number for my records. The free account never wrote back. That evening, I pulled the sofa away from the wall and vacuumed behind it, a task so mundane it felt like sacrament. I changed the sheets on my bed for the first time since the snap. I lit a candle that smelled like cedar in kitchens. I ate a proper meal. I sat at the table and wrote out a schedule, what I would do each day until move out. Small, measurable items. Day 4, call locksmith to schedule rekey for day 31, 10 a.m. Day 5, print 2 extra inventory copies. Day 6, email building manager my email. Elevator reservation. Anchor points for a week that threatened to slide. On day 7, the knock was light, tentative, not Mason's. I checked the peephole and saw no one. Then my phone rang. Mum. "Eliza," she said, voice tight in the way of someone holding something messy in both hands. "Are you at home?" "I am." I just had the most odd call. A breath. From Fiona, Mason's mother. The room tilted a degree. The candle sputtered as if it too were listening. "She said," Mum continued carefully, "that you've had some sort of breakdown, that you threw him out with nothing, that you owe him money and are refusing to return it. She was very concerned about you and also very invested in me confirming your stability." A slow, precise heat moved through me. Not rage, resolve. "I see," I said, and stood, already walking to the desk, already reaching for the folder labeled External Communications. What else did she say? Mum hesitated. "She implied Mason has been afraid of you, that you're—" She stopped herself. "Eliza, darling, what exactly is going on?" I looked at the inventory clipboard, at the printed notice, at the neat stack of evidence of a month I would never forget, The siege had expanded its borders exactly as predicted. "It's all right," I said softly, though neither of us believed all right meant pleasant. "I'll explain everything." I picked up the phone and the folder and moved to the table. A process is a bridge. I would walk my mother across. Mum came over that evening, a cardigan over her work blouse, the kind she wore when she expected tears. I opened the door before she could knock twice. She took one look at my face and forgot her script. "Oh, sweetheart." "It's fine," I said, and meant it the way people mean it when it isn't. We sat at the dining table. I handed her the folder. Inside, the notice to quit, the screenshots, the text chain, the copy of the email labeled "Property Secured, Access Terms." I let her read in silence. Halfway through, she set down the pages, jaw tight. "He told his mother you were unstable. He told her you threw him out without warning." "I gave him 30 days, I said. "That's more than fair." Mum nodded slowly, anger knitting itself behind her eyes. "You've always been the rational one. I see he mistook that for weak." We made tea. She insisted on washing the mugs before she left, like scrubbing the sink could steady something bigger. At the door, she hugged me tight. "Don't let them turn this into your shame," she whispered. "You're allowed to draw the line." After she left, the flat felt almost kind. The next week became a pattern of siege and paperwork. Mason cycled through every tactic in what I started calling the manipulator's manual in my notes. Phase 1, remorse. He left voicemails heavy with performance. "I don't know who I am without you. You're my person. Let's fix this before lawyers make it ugly." I logged them, unplayed. Phase 2, accusation. When silence didn't give him traction, he switched. "Mason, you're enjoying this, aren't you? The control." Mason, "Pierce said you've always been jealous of my success." Mason, "You'll regret treating me like an enemy." Each message was a brick in my evidence wall. Phase 3, reputation management. I began noticing it in the corners of social media. Pierce's stories about abusive partners, Damon's vague posts about men escaping toxicity. Then Mason's own upload, a tear-streaked selfie captioned, "Learning to rebuild after betrayal." Some people destroy what they fear can't belong to them. It gathered sympathy, like lint, comment hearts. "Stay strong, King. You deserve peace." I didn't comment, I didn't screenshot, I printed. Paper is harder to delete. On day 16, a message pinged from an unknown number. "Fiona Hale. Eliza, this is Mason's mother. We need to talk." I ignored it. 10 minutes later, another. "Fiona, I'm outside your building. Please don't make me knock." And she was. Through the window, I saw her silver SUV idling, Fiona herself in a pale coat, her posture rigid with maternal righteousness. I almost laughed at the predictability. When the buzzer rang, I opened the line, but not the door. "Fiona," I said, voice steady. "Eliza," she replied, sweet as a sermon. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mason tells me you've had a difficult time. You threw him out, kept his belongings, his livelihood, and he's worried about you." "I'm fine," I said. "His belongings are packed and documented. He'll receive everything on move-out day." Her tone sharpened. "You can't hold a man's property hostage because of a lover's spat." "This isn't a spat," I said. "It's a legal separation of residency." Silence hummed down the line. Then, colder. "You're proving him right." "I imagine he said I would." She exhaled, an audible shake of her head. "You're not well, dear. Please, let me in. Let's sort this." "No." I hung up, watched her stand in the drizzle for 2 minutes before she drove away. The next evening, Mason returned, this time with Fiona beside him. I saw them through the peephole before the knock came. He looked composed, rehearsed. She looked ready to sign a complaint. "Eliza," Fiona said, voice raised for the corridor, "give my son his things." "I've explained the terms," I said through the door. "He can collect essentials under supervision or the full inventory on day 30. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You're holding him financially hostage after he supported you all these years." I laughed quietly. "Supported me? I paid the rent, Fiona." "He told me you were drowning after your father's death," she said, pressing forward like the words were a weapon. "That you clung to him, that you—" "That's enough," I cut in. "This conversation is being recorded." A beat of silence, then Mason's attempt at authority. "You're out of line, Eliza. Just give me the laptop. You have no right." I pulled the folders from the table, flipped to the inventory sheet, and read aloud. Item 17, MacBook Pro, serial number ending 221, stored in box 2A. Release scheduled for move-out date, condition, key return. Listen to yourself, he said, frustration bleeding through the polished tone. You sound insane, like you're reading a manual. I am, I said. It's called procedure. Then I closed the door. They lingered a few minutes longer. Through the wood, I heard Fiona muttering, "She's unwell," and Mason replying, "Let her dig her own hole." Then footsteps. Silence. Days stretched. Nights were bureaucratic dreams. Forms, checklists, labeled envelopes. I slept on the couch, though not because I feared him breaking in. I just couldn't stomach our bed. The ghost of his laughter anchored in the sheets. By day 24, the noise outside had died down. His posts slowed. His friends unfollowed me. Even the trolls lost interest. The siege had collapsed under its own tedium. I took that as my win. On day 30, I woke early. The air felt clean, like a page waiting for ink. I brewed coffee, set up the clipboard on the table, and opened every curtain. At 9 sharp, Mason arrived with his father, not Fiona. The man looked weary, older than I remembered from polite dinners. He nodded to me once, a peace offering in gesture form. Behind him, Mason's eyes darted everywhere but mine. My friend Grace stood beside me as witness. She was calm, neutral, a quiet buffer of sanity. I handed Mason the clipboard. This document confirms receipt of all listed personal property. You'll sign and return the key afterward. He scanned it, jaw tight. You really went full corporate on this, huh? Yes, I said. Integrity is good architecture. He signed. Grace countersigned. He slid the key onto the counter like it burned. When the last box cleared the doorway, he turned once, something almost human crossing his face. Regret, maybe, or just disbelief that I'd never cracked. Then he left. The click of the door closing was quieter than I expected. I stood there until the elevator bell echoed faintly through the hall. Then, finally, I exhaled. That night, I changed the locks. The flat was mine again. Bare in places, but honest. I ate dinner at the table alone, lights low, a glass of wine breathing beside me. The bruised quiet that followed wasn't loneliness. It was reclamation. For the first time in months, the hum beneath everything, the one I'd thought was gone, came back. Tomorrow, I told myself I would start building something new, something with better foundations. 2 weeks later, the quiet had shape. Morning light slanted through the blinds like lines drawn by a steady hand. I worked at the same table that had once hosted fights disguised as dinner, noise disguised as passion. Now it held blueprints, sketches, and a mug that stayed exactly where I left it. The folder labeled Residency Termination Log was closed, signed, dated, filed away. Beside it sat a fresh one, Project Polaris. I hadn't planned to revisit the Polaris timepiece, but it kept intruding. The sketches, the proportions I'd obsessed over, the way I'd calculated its balance like it could anchor faith itself. I realized the piece wasn't ruined. It was misassigned. So I reclaimed it. The blog post took a week to write. Not a rage manifesto, not revenge. A study. Title: The Polaris Timepiece, A Study in Tensile Truth. It began with design. How every structure needs a fixed point, a reference that stays true when everything else shifts. I wrote about translating that principle into metal and glass, about engraving a star map from the night 2 people made promises, and what it means when those promises collapse. I wrote, an object like this is built to symbolize unwavering loyalty, but symbols don't lie. People do. When a story fails, the artifact remains, waiting for a new meaning. I included the high-resolution photos I'd taken, the close-up of the engraving, the soft gleam along the bezel. I credited the artisan, noted that the piece had been returned to its recipient as part of a formal property settlement. Then the closing paragraph. Art can be reclaimed, its story rewritten. The Polaris timepiece was designed to reflect truth. Instead, it revealed it. My next work will study resilience, the strength that appears only after structural failure. Foundations matter most when we build again. I published it on my professional portfolio site, linked it on LinkedIn and Nishian and Instagram, and went to bed. By morning, the views had quadrupled my usual traffic. The artisan shared it with the caption, "An engineer's honesty rendered in design." Comments poured in. Other designers, former clients, strangers who'd followed my work quietly. Messages like, "This is the most poetic case study I've ever read. Integrity as design principle. Bravo." A few were sharper. "Passive-aggressive much? We get it. Your ex cheated. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout. It just waits until the noise exhausts itself. By the weekend, Mason's circle had seen it. I knew because my friend Grace texted. Pierce and Damon just nuked their profiles. Naya posted a learning to love myself quote. Quiet over there. Through that silence, I felt something like release. Not triumph, something steadier, like the building had stopped trembling. Later, Graham, the same friend who'd stood witness on move-out day, called to say he'd overheard a story through the grapevine. Mason's crowd turned on each other over the trip debts, he said. Credit cards maxed, no refunds. Nia walked. His mom's furious. You don't need to do anything. It's handling itself. I thanked him, though the truth was, I hadn't been tempted to do anything for a while. The demolition was complete. There was nothing left to break. That night, I cleaned the flat one last time, but gently now. I opened the windows, let the air move through. The scent of cedar and something faintly sweet, maybe relief, filled the space. I sat at the table with a new sketch pad. The first line I drew wasn't jewelry, it was a bridge. Not an ornate one. Simple, functional, honest. I measured each span, each tension load, noting the points that would carry stress best. I labeled the corners, integrity, patience, grace. It sounds sentimental, I know, but engineers build from what we've learned, and I'd learned plenty. Sometimes the only way to keep a structure safe is to dismantle it and pour a better foundation. I stayed up late, pencil smudging my fingers. The city beyond my window hummed, steady, indifferent, alive. I thought about how quiet competence isn't glamorous, but it's what endures when the lights go out. When I finally crawled into bed, the silence didn't echo. It settled. Tomorrow I'd post a new update on the portfolio site. Project Resilience, in progress. But for now, I allowed myself to rest. Not happily ever after. Just structurally sound.